Okay, welcome everybody. Here we are for another Academy of Cheese amazing webinar. We are going to just tell you a little bit about the Academy of Cheese while you all join us into the webinar. So it's rocking and rolling. If you haven't already seen, level 3 modules, presenting and serving has been launched and ready to roll. If you run your own retail shop or thinking of setting up one, this is the perfect module for you. And ding, 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 the last level 3 module is lined up, buying and distribution, and will be launched in the next couple of weeks. So that is very, very exciting. So happy for lots of people who have Christmas holidays to study cheese, I'm sure. So tonight, what I would like you to do is tell me in the chat where you are joining from in the world, please. I want you to say hello to us and where you are joining from. Any questions and answers you have, questions, not answers, but any questions you have, please do put those in the chat. Hello, Rob from Bristol. Sharon's here from New York. Oh, Patrick, we know you're here from Brighton, you
I don't
cheeky
know I'm from
monkey.
Brighton necessarily.
San Francisco, Mid Wales, I
Oh,
love it. Reykjavik,
no,
Pennsylvania. Oh
indeed.
my
Hello.
God, this always blows my mind
Oh, we've got a very
that we
knowledgeable
can
audience. I'm a bit
we
worried
can
now.
do this and Zoom and have all these amazing
Oh
people
my
from around
God, these people,
Newcastle,
so
Vancouver.
amazing.
I love it. I love
Oh,
it.
thank you so
It
much for
is so
joining from
awesome
all of
that
these places.
Gonya, hello, Gonya from
the power
yeah.
of technology. So please do put any of your questions for Patrick and Carlos into the chat or into the
About cheese
Q&A.
questions.
Yeah,
I'm
only
not going
cheese
to answer
questions,
any
not about
financial questions.
hairstyles,
Well,
Christmas
hairstyles. I mean, I'm
presents.
happy to talk cricket, football, but let's keep it cheese.
I can do walking football.
Yeah.
Yeah, so please do. And we will manage those as we go along, or we will answer them at the end. So without further ado, I am going to start the webinar. I'm going to hand you over to Patrick and Carlos. I'm going to disappear, but I'm here and can answer any questions.
Thanks,
So
Tracy.
over to you. Two, I have to just say, these are the most professional people I know in cheese
Oh, stop.
who have so much knowledge. And this book is just phenomenal.
It's
We
too
love
much,
it.
Tracy. It's too
Another
much.
cheese book, but
It's too
just a
much.
different cheese book.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for hosting this.
Thank you.
We really, really appreciate it. And it feels like
I love it.
well, yeah, no, but it feels like a few years ago when we were all doing things online during COVID. It's a kind of step back to that. So
It
it's nice.
is.
It's so nice to have the whole world being online. It's great. So thank you very
It
much.
is. It's
Yeah, thank you.
fantastic. Okay, guys, over to you.
Thank you.
So how should we say? Well, should we introduce ourselves, Carlos? You go
Let's
first.
start
Who
with
are you?
that. I am Carlos Yescas. I am originally from Mexico, but I now live in the north of England, in Newcastle. I have worked in the cheese industry for about 17, 18, 20, I don't know, many years up there in the 18 years. And I put cheese tours together. I write cheese and I co-own a cheese company with my sister in Mexico. And yeah, I'm a geek of cheese. I love eating cheese. So that's me.
And, and I'm Patrick McGuigan. I am a cheese writer, so a journalist. I've been writing about food for more than 20 years, and cheese has become my speciality probably in the past 15 or 16 years. So I write for newspapers and magazines, and obviously we write. We've written our book together. I've got a couple of other books that I've written. You can just oh look, they're on my shoulder. Look, I've got a little family of cheese books.
Uh,
And I also do a lot of training for the Academy of Cheese. So I teach level 1 and level 2. Yeah, so like Carlos, we travel a lot and visit cheesemakers and cheesemongers all over the world. Um, so I suppose we should probably. I'm in control of some slides, which is a dangerous thing, but maybe we should. Let's talk a little bit, Carlos, about the book. So it's called. Let me get my screen going. Do you want to? You want to?
So I can tell you that the book is One Cheese to Rule Them All. Um, yeah, why is it called One Cheese to Rule Them All? We're not quite sure, but we quite like the
No, we
name.
are. What do you mean we're not sure? We know. So the book. So this. I'm going to get off that picture of me and Carlos. We look like that's like the AI's made that photo. What's going on there? So the book is published by Murdoch. It's called One Cheese to Rule Them All. In search of the world's 100 best cheeses, and it's all about the World Cheese Awards, which was the idea, wasn't it, Carlos? That's where it sort of initially came from. Carlos, it was your idea actually. Let's give you your due. You
Thank
phoned
you.
me up one day and said, we've been judges at the World Cheese Awards for, well, at that point, 12, 15 years. There's a book in this, and that's sort of where it started. So do you want to carry on? What was the idea?
So I think the idea at the beginning was that, the World Cheese Awards was turning 35, and I just really wanted to sort of highlight all of the things that go behind the scenes of putting together cheese awards, but also all of the wonderful people who are in our industry. A lot of our friends, not only judges but also cheesemakers and people involved in the industry. And I wanted, that kind of story, but also talk about cheese. And I wanted a book that had a little bit beyond the story of the basics of cheese, of taste and flavor and pairings, and tell a little bit of more of story. And so, like Patrick said, I called him one day out of the blue. I texted him and I was like, "Do you have a minute to talk?" And Patrick, who is one of the kindest person in cheese, said, "Yes, I'll talk to you." And we started chatting, and he said, "Why don't you send something?" And so I think I wrote like a paragraph or two paragraphs, and then Patrick troubleshoot, and then what happened? We got involved with our agent, Holly, who really believed in this book, and then she went and tried to sell it. So does that sum it all? I kind of
Yeah,
forget
I
how
think I
it
think
kind of
for
happened.
people, I mean, the thing is, we've just come back from the World Cheese Awards in Switzerland, and yeah, we sort of assume everyone knows what that is. So the World Cheese Awards is organised by the Guild of Fine Food. It's a British company and organisation, and they essentially started in 1988 in London. And the idea is you get cheeses from all over the world to one place where they're judged in a single day. And at the end of it, you have a world champion cheese. Now, in 1988, I think it started with 250 cheeses. Half of them were British and the rest were French, essentially. But the awards have sort of grown and evolved into this incredible kind of sort of the greatest cheese show on earth, really, where the one that just happened in November was there was over 5,000 cheeses, and really it's such a global event now with cheeses from Japan and South Africa and the US, Latin America, all over Europe. So we use that as the sort of the starting point, and cheeses are judged, um, uh, using all of your senses. Really, there's a sort of a system of assessing the cheeses for quality and flavor and so on. So we used that as a starting point and then we went over all the data from over 35 years and picked out cheeses that had won lots of awards over the years, but also what we wanted to highlight as what we thought were good cheeses. So the Guild of Fine Food has had no input on the 100 cheeses in there. It was all down to Carlos and I. And it certainly wasn't a scientific exercise. We did go through all the data, but there was also an element of our experience because we've both been judges for, well, 15 years at least. And we've actually sat as judges at the final. They had to split us up after one year because we kept making each other laugh. So we've sat next to each other and been on the supreme panel at the end, which is a kind of great honor. So we've used that in the book, just to sort of finish off how the book works. 100 cheeses, detailed, there's a profile of each, sort of where, who, why, and how, drinks and accompaniments. It's split into sort of the chronology of the awards. So it starts in the 80s and 90s, and we have a section at the end where we predict cheeses that we think are ones to watch. And this is sort of what it looks like. So you can sort of see, there's a couple of cheeses, Camembert and Bailey Haze and Blue, a couple of pages. Some cheeses get 4 pages, and we call them hero cheeses, where we think these really are contenders for some of the best cheeses in the world. And this is the World Cheese Awards, wearing the same shirt that I did at the I probably should have put a different shirt on. But you can see all these cheeses. They're all blind judged. The morning session, 50 cheeses, more or less, are judged by a team of sort of 2 or 3 judges. You don't know where the cheeses are from. You don't know who's made them. You get kind of, 7 or 8 goat cheeses, 7 or 8 hard sheep's milk cheeses, and there's sort of, you have over the 50 cheeses, lots of different categories. And then you can see at the bottom, the final is sort of live judged. So the cheeses are narrowed down over a series of judgings, and then you end up with a live final where people eat cheese in front of an audience and vote. And then you have a world champion cheese. Is that right, Carlos? Anything to add on the judging process?
No, I think that's very well explained. I think one of the things that we should say here is that, the logistics to get these cheeses from around the world depends on 20 consolidation points. And so there's cheeses coming from, 46 countries, but some of them come to a consolidation point and then it all moves. And just the logistics of that is kind of amazing, that it happens like that. And then, there's a team of people at the Guild of Fine Food that spends a day putting all these cheeses that you can see here in the tables, making sure that everything gets scanned and everything gets on the tables at the right locations, so that when the judges arrive to judge, there's a code there, and the cheese that corresponds to that code is there. So I just, to me, this idea of how is put together is just magnificent. And so if you go watch WCA TV, you can see sort of the building of the tables, which is quite impressive. And I think that when Patrick says, this is the greatest cheese, the greatest festival of cheese on earth, it really gets you that feeling that all of a sudden 5,000 cheeses sort of appear, and then 250 judges appear to judge them, and that process goes so fast. We try to capture that feeling of the competition in the book in the beginning of trying to explain how the tasting happens.
I think as well, just in terms of, so the World Cheese Awards was sort of this idea. I think there's something quite interesting around this idea of the best cheese. Everybody wants to know. Whenever I do tastings or I write articles, everyone wants to know, what's the best cheese? What's the one that I should be buying? And the World Cheese Awards, is a vehicle for thinking about quality and deliciousness and what makes a really, a cheese a really good cheese. So that's kind of where the title came from, the one cheese to rule them all, because every World Cheese Awards, there is a winner. There is one cheese at the end that is, for that year, the world champion cheese. And this year it was a Gruyère. In previous years, it's been everything from, Camembert and Gouda, Stilton. And what was quite interesting is looking at the data, and it is how the cheese world has changed since the late 80s and early 90s. So in the first sort of decade, it's all the big hitters that are winning the awards. It's Gruyère's in there, Gouda, Camembert, I think, wins in the first decade. And then you see decade by decade how it becomes more international. You start seeing more unusual cheeses winning. Um, in the 2000s, there's still the big names that are winning. I'm just having a flick through now. Um,
I mean, just to say here that, Patrick is right on this. And so we include in the little write-ups when the cheese won the medal. And so, for example, for Camembert, it says that it won world champion in 2001. So that's very early on. And then, but it also had won in 2004. And we include that information, which I think it's quite interesting to see what won. But for some cheeses, we it's not just the generic cheese camembert. We are also name the farm, the producer that does that. So as as someone reading the book, you can be like, not just a Gruyere, which there are many in the world, but you can actually know who made that one Gruyere that won that one year. And that's quite important because it gives you also a sense that even within these big brands like Gruyere, Parmigiano Reggiano, Camembert, there are some producers who are exceptional in making cheese. And I think Patrick and I are going to taste an exceptional cheese today, but we'll get to that when we start talking
well,
about.
should we have a pic? Should we have I mean, we were going to start with Latour, and Latour won an award. So it's an Italian cheese. I might just come off actually if I. So we've taken sort of he's got these beautiful um, illustrations in the book, which we really, really love, which were done for us by Amanda Hallam. And then we also have a little box so you can kind of, the basics. So Latour, you can see won a gold in 2012. And we wanted to, I mean, I wrote this one. So we've got 100 cheeses. Sort of Carlos wrote 50, I wrote 50, and we sort of split it that way. Latour is a cheese I know really well. I visited the dairy in Piedmont, and it's a cheese you see quite often in the UK and the US actually. So that was the other thing. We really wanted to get a spread of countries and styles of cheese. We didn't just want to have all the usual suspects. The usual suspects are all in there. If you want to read about Brie de Meaux or Parmigiano Reggiano or Stilton or cheddar, it's all covered. But we also wanted to throw in some cheeses which perhaps fly under the radar or are from countries that you might have to travel there to taste them. So we have Japanese cheeses in the book and Mexican cheeses and Brazilian cheeses, which you're going to find it hard to buy them in Europe or the US, but if you're on holiday there, you can go and check them out. So Latour is made in Piedmont, which is in the northwest of Italy, beautiful part of the world. It's you sort of hit the Maritime Alps, you go over the Maritime Alps, and you're into the south of France. And it's an area that's full of incredible wine. Like Barolo is probably its most famous. It's the home of white truffles. There's a big market at Alba every year, and lots of amazing cheeses made there. It's the home of slow food, and they have a great cheese festival. If anyone's been to the Slow Food Cheese Festival in Bra in Piedmont, you'll know it is the whole city or town is taken over with cheesemakers from all over the world. And Latour is an interesting one because it's mixed milk. And we thought there was an interesting story there. It's a delicious cheese, we love it. It's won an awards, but also it's got this kind of interesting backstory, which is in Piedmont. You'd have quite small farms historically. It's quite hilly, and so they would have small farms. So rather than just having cows or just having sheep or just having goats, they would sort of protect themselves, spread the risk by having all three, but maybe not a huge number of cows, not a huge number of goats. So, if there was a problem with your cows, at least you still got goat's milk. So I suppose it was a way for these smaller farms to sort of protect themselves, and sort of spread the risk, really. And so what would happen historically is you would sort of mix your milks, at certain times of the year. Your cheese might have more sheep or goat's milk, in the spring, for example, that in the winter the cow milk content would probably go up because the goats and the sheep would dry off. I'm actually going to come off the screen here so we can sort of I just want to hold up this amazing cheese, Latour, if you can see that, which has this incredible sort of wrinkly rind. And when I went to visit Caseificio Alta Langa is the area of Piedmont where they make it. It's the Merlot family that make it. It's kind of based on a Robbiola, which is a really traditional cheese from the area, but they decided not to get protected status and make it into and have a brand, which is I think that's quite interesting. So rather than go down the kind of PDO protected cheese route, which they could have, they said, do you know what, we're going to make our own brand, which is quite unusual for a lot of Italian cheesemakers. You tend to make, the protected local cheese, but it's allowed them to export, and it's their intellectual property. So a lot comes to the UK, a lot goes to the US, and this balancing of the three different milks gives the cheese all sorts of interesting flavors, I think. Tracey, you're back. Did you have a question?
I'm back because I just wanted to ask you guys a question. It would be really lovely if on some of these cheeses that you're tasting, if you could talk through them as if you were judging them.
Shall we do a live judging?
Because I know you're both so well trained by the Academy of Cheese at judging.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to say that, the structured approach to tasting that the Academy does, and I teach that at level 1 and level 2, if you ever want to do some cheese judging, the structured approach is a really good starting point, because it teaches you about looking at a cheese, feeling a cheese, the texture, smelling and tasting. And those are the 4 steps of assessing a cheese in the Academy of Cheese. And Carlos, that's kind of what we do when we're judging. You have a good look at it, you pick it up, you feel it, smell it, and then taste it.
Texture in the mouth.
Texture.
I haven't got Latour, but there's a couple of people who are saying they have W. Field and Dace. So yeah, come on, Carlos, give us your professional
I'll start
opinion.
with mine. So I got mine from a reputable British store. But so it arrived and it's in good condition overall. But then I don't know if you can actually see it, but
We can.
my piece has that wrinkly in sort of moist part, and then wrinkly that is quite dry, quite crusty. And so, the first thing that we judge is appearance. And so if I had gotten this cheese at the awards, I would say, the mold that is growing, which is Geotrichum candidum, is actually starting to die, and Penicillium camembert is starting to take over. And so it changes the type of mold that shows. And so I would expect that cheese to then, not at this stage, but start developing ammonia notes. And so I would dock points from the judging at this point because it's developing that other mold, which is not that is not part of the production, but you want to control that in sort of the process of the appearance. And even just there, I have told you just by looking at it what I'm thinking I'm going to be tasting, and I think most judges would have that knowledge that what it will taste, what it will smell, even before smelling it or tasting it, just by looking at the cheese. So, although appearance is only 5 points at the World Cheese Awards, it is still an important part. And so many times when I'm working with cheesemakers, they don't really think about the appearance of their cheese or how it arrives in competition. And it really does matter because it can make the difference between a gold and a silver medal. So
the big problem, though, is I suppose one of the big problems is what you were talking about before, is the logistics of getting those cheeses there, especially for something like a little Latour, soft, small cheese.
Yeah.
How it's packaged to get there, to travel on its journey to wherever the World Cheese Awards is hosted. And as judges, we're always asked to to take that into consideration, aren't we?
I would say these little soft, delicate cheeses are the trickiest ones. They're at a disadvantage
Yeah,
because it's so hard to get them to, halfway across the world in perfect condition and perfect ripeness. It's interesting. Carlos and I both got our cheeses from the same place. I'm going to say who it is. We got ours from Fine Cheese Company, and mine is in absolutely perfect condition. Like the rind all the way round is beautifully wrinkly. It's still part of the cheese. The
that's
breakdown,
it.
which is, this is where you start talking about texture. You've got this sort of creamy, like clotted cream sort of core, but underneath the rind, it's really silky and velvety and gooey. Which is this is in the perfect state of ripeness for me. So I've got it all over my fingers. It will be in my eyebrows later. I'm going for dinner later. I'm going to be like covered in cheese in the restaurant.
My mouth's watering at your description
But
now.
this is if this arrived on a table in, say, Switzerland, or next year it's going to be in Spain, and it's come from Italy, or it's come from Japan, or I would be so impressed that they've managed to get it there in that condition. And aroma's the other thing. I mean, there's a lot of sniffing of cheeses at the World Cheese Awards, and actually with these cheeses, like Carlos says, what you don't really want a big hit of ammonia, because that suggests the cheese has gone over a bit and it's too ripe. But this is not that at all. It's got a lovely. I mean, they look a bit like little goat's cheeses, but because of the cow and the sheep in there, it has this really interesting aroma. Don't you think, Carlos? It's quite like. So if I get a bit, when you're talking to people from the US, I know we've got a lot of people from the US here, and Carlos spent a long time there. I sometimes use the word barnyard, right? And in the US, everyone's like, "Oh, barnyard, ooh," and you might have an American judge that you're judging with, and I'll say, "Oh, it's got this lovely." So I mean, for me, barnyard is quite a clean aroma of like hay, and do you know what I mean? It's not
Really good silage or compost.
well, more
Yeah.
like just fresh
Yeah.
hay that
Okay.
that's just
Okay.
been put down.
Okay.
But if you talk to an American judge, they may be like, "Oh yeah, barnyard, that's a fault." And then I'd say, "Oh well, I'm talking about that sort of fresh hay," and they'd be, "Oh yeah, yeah." So there is sometimes you have to have a bit of a kind of, there is a sort of international language of cheese, which actually is where, coming back to the structured approach, having that vocabulary that everybody sort of understands is quite useful.
Yeah. Lexicons.
Yeah, so Tracy's just saying, yeah, fresh hay versus barnyard. So that's quite a British, I think. I don't know. I
And
always think
Tracy's in Canada. Yeah.
she's in
Yeah.
Canada,
Yeah.
yeah, and she is British but lives in Canada. So the flavors, I don't know. What do you think on the flavor, Carlos, for that?
I mean, I love the flavor, and here is where this cheese really shines. Obviously, the texture is amazing, and but the flavor is that has the lactic sort of milky part of the goat, and then it has a roundness of the sheep's milk that is quite nice. And I think I think one of the things about making mixed milk cheeses is finding always that balance. And some cheeses can be overpowered by cow's milk or can be overpowered by goat's milk and be just really goaty. And so I think always a good Latour will have exactly that balance of flavors of lactic, but also sort of like warming sort of sheep's milk. It shouldn't smell like you're with the goat or the sheep. It shouldn't smell clean. I think that's what you were getting to the barnyard and fresh hay.
I think that's so. For me, in the UK, barnyard's quite a positive description, but in other parts of the world, that might be quite a negative description. So, but for me, it's almost got like a hay sort of, and there's a bit of sweetness and richness from the sheep's milk, I think. When I went to visit the Merlot family who make it, it's a very interesting cheese how they make it because it's quite large scale production. I was quite surprised when I went. They make a lot of cheese, but they've done it by, this is what we call a lactic cheese. So you add starter cultures to the milk and let the milk acidify for a long time, overnight. and then you make this, you get this very sort of delicate curd and this lovely kind of lovely acidity in the final cheese. And the way you do that is usually like in buckets, essentially. And I thought, oh, when I turned up the factory, I was like, wow, it's going to be like a huge vat, but all they'd done to scale up was just buy lots of buckets. So they just had lots and lots of people sort of making small batches. So basically, the way they scaled up was just by employing lots more people and using lots more buckets. So it was sort of made, it was a really interesting way to see you can sort of do artisan, but at scale, which I found quite interesting. And um, he told me that because the fat content of the milks change throughout the season, it can be a bit of a nightmare trying to get a really consistent cheese. He said the way that they handle that is they adjust the fat content by adding double cream. So this is a triple cream cheese. So it might be the fat levels of the goat and the sheep have dropped a bit, and so they'll just add a little bit more cow's milk cream. And so that's how they get, because Latour is always pretty consistent throughout the year. And using cream as your kind of buffer, I thought was quite interesting. Should we move on? Should we move on to the next cheese?
Definitely.
Which
We should.
is, what are we going? We're going Camembert next.
Yeah. So I just want to show my Camembert to start because, I think this is the sign of a very good Camembert. Those little eyes, which some people maybe put, but, they're mechanical eyes as opposed to microbial. So there won't be coliforms here. It will be the mechanical eyes. And this Camembert is just, I mean, it just smells gorgeous. Camembert is one of my favorite cheeses in the world. And this one just smells so much like sort of cooked cabbage and a little bit of Brussels sprouts, which I think is exactly what this cheese should smell like. Um, we have
This
um,
is
yeah,
there's an issue at the moment where we in the UK we can't get raw milk Camembert in the UK. There's something called lumpy skin disease, which sounds really, you need to get to the doctor with that straight away if you've got lumpy skin disease. It's actually a disease that's in that you find in cattle, and there's been an outbreak in France, Italy, and Spain, and the UK government has decided to ban all raw milk, soft cow's milk cheeses for the foreseeable future. So Camembert de Normandy, which is, we write a lot about that in the book, you can't buy in the UK at the moment. But what's happened has been quite interesting this year. The industry has pivoted quite quickly and started making pasteurized versions of Camembert in France and bringing them over. And so this one that we're tasting is it's supplied by an affineur called Rudolph Lemernier, who's actually based in the Loire Valley, not Normandy. Camembert is normally from Normandy, as its sort of historic heartland. But because this is not a PDO cheese, Camembert can be made anywhere. This one's made in the Loire Valley, but Camembert de Normandy is the original PDO protected raw milk cheese. Well, we can't get that. But I have to say, Carlos, for a pasteurized Camembert,
it's
is
very good.
tasting sensational, I would say.
And I see there a question about um, the structure of Camembert, if it should have ice or not. I have tasted many a Camembert raw milk in France, and they will always have small ice. Of course, as it matures, and it breaks down the paste, it will start, those eyes will start disappearing, but definitely most camemberts will have very small perforations, and that's quite normal of good quality camembert. I normally think of that other brand that you can buy in there in the supermarkets that is quite pasty with no ice as very industrialized cheese that the milk has actually been homogenized, and that's why it becomes so blind in the taste. Um,
We I wrote the section on Camembert. We put Camembert in each of our five sections. We had a hero cheese, and it's one cheese where we went into a bit more depth, and we felt that, if any cheese, if there's going to be one cheese to rule them all, we put in the riders and runners that we thought were really good contenders, and we felt that Camembert, it's such a global cheese. Yes, Carrie, you do eat the rind. Always eat the rind of a Camembert. Don't be scared of rinds. Give them a go. If you don't like them, um, then don't eat them. But especially with these soft cheeses, it's a good idea. Um, so I can't remember what I was talking about now. What was I saying?
um, we're talking about hero cheeses
Oh
and
yeah, hero
the
cheeses,
factor as
and
well.
we picked Camembert because it's such a um, global success story. Every country makes a Camembert style cheese, um, but in France, the history of Camembert is just fascinating. It's so linked in with French national identity and culture in a way that I would argue is kind of unique for French cheese. I mean, that's a hell of a thing to say because the French love their cheese. Regionally, they get behind their local regional cheeses in a way that I think, as a Brit, I find quite hard to understand just how deep the connection is with their food. But I would say, as a national cheese, Camembert from Normandy is unique, and that ties in with various things. One, it comes in these great boxes, so these are just great marketing tools. And the labels on Camembert over the years have usually will cover everything from politics. They'll have pictures of presidents, film stars. The latest sports hero will appear, so they sort of link in with culture in that way. But during the First World War, the Camembert producers in Normandy were clever and donated a proportion of their production to the government to put in rations. So if you were one of the poilus, one of the hairies, as they're known, the guys fighting for France in the trenches, you would get a little piece of Camembert in your rations. And it became this sort of one little moment of joy in these awful days of death and destruction. And so when after the war, it sort of had this really important place in French people's hearts. And so there's a lot of politics around Camembert because Camembert de Normandy has to be made with raw milk, the PDO cheese. But for a long time, the big industrial producers have switched to have lobbied for the PDO to be changed so that pasteurized milk can be allowed. And it's known as the Camembert Wars. And at the moment, Camembert de Normandy is doing pretty well and has fought off the big industrial producers. It's still raw milk, and actually, there's been some new fermier farmhouse producers setting up in Normandy. Um, so yeah. Anyway, that's Camembert. I mean, it's one of your favourites, isn't it, Carlos? Is it your favourite cheese?
I think it's yeah, I think it's probably my favorite cheese. I have had an epiphany moment with it, which I remember being in France for a meeting of raw milk cheese advocates, and it was lunchtime, and someone just sort of opened a cooler, and there were like camemberts and with no label. They were just like that. And basically there was one for each one that was which one of us. And so I had never had that moment of like, oh, this is just my personal camembert to eat. And like you say, it's such a French institution. And everyone just gonna grab a piece of bread, open it up, put a piece, like cut the piece of camembert, put it inside and start eating. And it's like, wow, this is real French culture. Here is the moment, like, because I think in other parts of the world we are used to like maybe baking Camembert or putting a cheese board. But the French don't do that with their Camembert. They just really put it on a piece of bread and eat it in the go, and that's how it is part of their identity. And so seeing it just really became um, that idea to me that Camembert is not fancy, and and if we always thinking about how fancy cheese is, it's very difficult to connect it to people. But if we actually are, if we understand it in culture, most of these cheeses are not fancy in their home countries. They're cheeses of the everyday that people use and eat for lunch or dinner while making food, and I think that's quite important for the cheese, and that's why Camembert is such a has made such impression on me.
Interesting. Shirley Lummer's just said that she had Camembert in 1988 whilst biking in Normandy. That sounds like a good holiday. And whether it's changed a lot since then. Um, I mean, it's quite interesting. Raw milk uh, you have to make Camembert de Normandy with raw milk. But I would think in the 80s, the milk being used then would have been, I think the cheeses would have been funkier. I think they would have been more intense, more kind of highly flavored. Because although there's different levels of raw milk, and actually what's happened in France, although cheesemakers are committed to using unpasteurized milk, farming practices have become much more kind of efficient and aware of cleanliness in the milking parlor, in the dairy, and there's much stronger regulations on cheesemakers and farmers these days around raw milk, so that actually you can look at the kind of the bacterial load in raw milk these days, and it's actually quite clean. There isn't that much, compared to sort of 50 years ago. The microbial load within raw milk across the world is relatively is a lot less than it was 50 years ago, when perhaps those legislations weren't quite as strict. Anyway, I think we should move. Let's move on to another fantastic. We can talk a bit about raw milk with this one, actually. I think so. Gruyere. We had to have a Gruyere um, in the book for sure, because it's won the World Cheese Awards. It's been the world champion more than any other cheese. So 6 times now. Le Gruyère from Switzerland has been named the world champion. 4 of those times were from one affineur, which is von Mühlenen, Valo von Mühlenen, who's based in Fribourg. And the cheese that Carlos and I both have is a 15-month Valo um, Gruyere.
I mean, it just made my knees weak. It's so. Oh,
Always raw milk. So this is another. It's got an AOP, Appellation Origine Protégée. Must be made in the Western Alps, in certain cantons, including Fribourg and Vaud and that kind of thing. Mountain cheese. So the cows are out in the summer grazing great pastures. Um, it's interesting that von Mühlen. Well, it's just why, Carlos, does Gruyere win so often at the World Cheese Awards? It's the question I'm asked a lot, because it's always in the final. There's always at least one. Or if let's widen out, there's always at least sort of one Alpine style. So it could be a Burkhaser or a Comté or a Beaufort. But more often, Appenzella was in the final this year. But more often than not, it's a Gruyere. But why does Gruyere keep winning?
I mean, I think that the things that some of the things that we come up with the book is that, these, for the most part, the cheeses that are winning are made with cow's milk of cows who are quite pampered, are eating a very diverse diet that is really, resemble of the place. And that microbiology of the milk and the soil gets maintained because it's raw milk, and then the flavor of the cheese has so much more intensity, more nuance, more notes. And so just to start with that part, the milk and the cheese is more flavorful. It has more nuance. And then the process of making camembert, with the with the cooking of the curd and all that, sort of it sends in makes more intensity, more intense umami flavors, and we're just drawn to those flavors, right? That they make us feel whole and warm, and like we have eaten a good meal. And then there's the combination of the salt, which for Gruyere and these Alpine cheeses is not necessarily a flavor enhancer. It really is a control of microbial diversity. And so I think is that, and then then you take it to the next level, which is like aging, in the perfect conditions in a mountain or in a cellar. Uh, just everything builds flavor. Every single part of the process of making builds flavor to the point that most Alpine cheeses start quite strong, and so it is easier to sort of grab the attention of judges at that point. There is also a lot of technology, a lot of knowledge, a lot of research that has gone into these Alpine cheeses, and so they're more stable than other cheeses from other parts of the world, and other styles that may not have all of that sort of power of the industry behind to create cheeses that are almost perfect every time. So yeah.
And I mean, I think it goes back a bit to what we were saying about transporting cheese to get to the cheese awards, is that it's a lot easier to put a wheel of Gruyere, pack that up and send it halfway across the world than it is a Camembert. It's going to arrive in a pretty good condition. Gruyere has always been exported and used to be packed into barrels and put on ships and sent all over the world. And it's because it's a stable cheese that transports well. But I always think it's really interesting that the flavor profiles of Gruyere seem to cut across all nationalities, so that Japanese judges love Gruyere, Mexican judges love Gruyere, Europeans, Australian, South African, and there's something about there's savory, sweet, salty notes in there. There's often a sort of caramel kind of sort of sweetness to it, and a nuttiness, sort of like roasted hazelnuts, and then this kind of meaty, savory thing that comes from nearer the rind. And though that combination of flavors seems to cut across all cultures in a way that British cheeses, I'll be like, oh, have you tried Caerphilly? And for some people, it's just not gonna hit them in the same way, or some of the Spanish cheeses, with those powerful sort of sheep's milk cheeses, they don't seem to kind of talk to everyone
Right.
in the same way that these Alpine style cheeses do. So if you're gonna be looking for one cheese to rule them all, I think, and we discussed this in the conclusion, is a good place to start looking is up mountains, really, because it's not just Gruyere, it's things like Appenzeller and Burgkäse, which is a cheese I don't really know very well. I was looking at the data; it wins all the time at the World Cheese Awards.
Yeah.
So there's something, yeah. The von Muhlenen family. So this also brings in this idea of affinage and the role that aging plays. So this one affineur, the von Muhlenen family, have won the World Cheese Awards 4 times in various different guises as different companies. So the skill of the person maturing the cheese should not be underestimated. What happens in these caves is really important. Siobhan is asking from Ireland, fantastic cheesemaker. St.
A
Toland is in
controversial
the book.
question.
So asking whether AOPs and PDO status are as relevant now when there are so many cheeses from all over the world as opposed to just in Europe. I would say that PDO is particularly powerful in Europe. Maybe not so much in Ireland. You tell us, Siobhan, you're there, but certainly in France and Italy, if a cheese has PDO protected status, it does tend to translate into higher sales. The consumers understand those PDO and AOP labels quite well, and will buy the cheeses on the back of it. But in the UK, PDOs are far less well recognised, and yeah, you're saying maybe not so in Ireland, but and whether PDOs are the PDOs are quite different in how they're written. It depends who writes the PDOs. Some of them are very strict and really tight, and others are quite wide, and so that you've got to. I mean, I do use it if I'm in a European country and I don't know the cheese. If I see a PDO cheese, I will try it because it's a good sign, but it's not always, a perfect kind of system. But
Yeah, we should jump to the next cheese because
let's
we have
move on to
like
Ireland.
10
Yeah, yeah.
minutes for two cheeses. So we're gonna stay in Ireland. The next cheese that we have is Cashel Blue. It is pronounced Cashel Blue, not Cashel. I have it from good authority, the family. So it is cow's milk blue cheese that was invented in the kitchen, and then it became, I think, one of the most important cheeses of Ireland. Is also one of my favorite cheeses. It is. I'm not gonna eat it right now because I'm speaking, but um, it has sort of like creamy custardy, and then the blueness is quite mild. Does is not like other blue cheeses that is quite pronounced and mineral and acidic. This one ends up being more um, sort of in the umami, salty notes, and that's quite nice for this cheese. And then, it's a family company that makes very good cheese, puts out a lot of cheese, and it's sold everywhere in the world, which is funny because most people that I have talked to from Australia or from South Africa, think it's a big conglomerate cheese from Ireland that is, putting out all these cheeses, and it really isn't. It's really still a farmstead cheese or a farmhouse cheese, not a farmstead cheese because they don't have their own animals. And it is one of the best blue cheeses. It consistently wins awards. It has been very close to winning the entire championship and always shy by 2 points. By the likes of Gruyère, who ends up winning a lot of other times. But it is definitely a wonderful cheese and one that can be found in many places. What are you tasting on this cheese, Patrick?
I was thinking about I was in a tiny, tiny little town in Piedmont on a holiday, and where they have the market and the cheese truck pulls up and the side comes down and it's full of Italian cheeses. Cashel Blue was in the truck. I was like, for crying out loud, it's become this sort of global sensation, really. And I think the reason for that is because um, it's not a challenging blue. Some blues are pretty full on, Roquefort or Cabrales or even Stilton people can find a bit too strong. But I would say Cashel Blue is much more in that sort of French continental style of blue, like Fond d'Ambert or Bleu d'Auvergne. It's sort of it's got some spice, but it's quite tempered, and there's a lot of cream and butter actually with Cashel. I sort of get a sort of butteriness to it. Um, so it's a real sort of crowd pleaser, I think.
Yeah. And just in sort of like judge terms, just really quickly here, is when we see a cheese like this, that has good marbling of blue everywhere. That's something that we're looking for, something that doesn't have just big pockets of blue somewhere, but that the blue actually has moved around and gives an entire flavor to the cheese. And that marbling is really made in the process of making, but enhanced in affinage. And one of the things about Casual Blue is a whole system that they have developed where they put the wheels and they turn them. You can go and look at it online, but they turn them in a very special way, so they don't make feet that are really heavy and the blue moves around it consistently, and also the fat in the cheese sort of travels up and down. So it is a good consistent cheese, and that's what you really want for a blue cheese, because if it's dry at the top or very wet at the bottom, it will develop very rancid, acidic notes.
Finbar Deary is an excellent judge at the World Cheese Awards. Has said for me, Cash was about that sweet milkiness and the pasture story. The quality of milk is couched in the structure of blue and salt, balanced. Absolutely, 100%. And last year, the year before, I drove around Ireland tasting lots of different cheeses, and there was something around Irish cheese in general that I found was different to British cheese, and I think it's to do with the pasture in Ireland. I might have had a few too many Guinnesses and sort of bought into the Blarney. I don't know, but I do think the amount of rainfall that you get in Ireland and that green grass does translate into a kind of, to me, it was like a butteriness across all the sort of cow's milk cheeses that I was tasting. That was quite, had a sort of almost a kind of an Irish kind of DNA almost. Let's finish with dessert, Carlos. Look,
Yes.
we're gonna have some pudding. Look at this beauty.
I mean, like, what a gorgeous cheese. I know that many of you may not have been able to get it. It's not easy to get Brunost. The one that we got is from Heidel Yeastery in the middle of Norway. It is, as we say, or as I write in the book, is this even cheese? That's the first question that comes up.
No,
What do we actually think cheese is, right? So, Brunost is made from the whey of the milk, not necessarily from the protein and so the curd of the milk. And it it is the process of making also is not 100% cheese making, is boiling whey until it becomes ricotta, and then you pass the point of ricotta. And for Brunos, you put cream, and so then you develop this sort of a structure that is closer to a caramel. But what makes Brunos different from caramel is that because it has started from whey, from cheese making, it has sort of a fermented acidic uh, flavor that I think is quite pleasant. I'm not gonna do because I'm speaking, but we went to the World Cheese Awards in Norway. In Trondheim 3 years ago, and I had the privilege of taking a tour of people around, and we visited a couple of producers, and it really became very obvious of why it's such a big cheese in Norway. That they have production of milk and they eat a lot of butter, so they end up with milk that is already half of the cream, and then they make cheese with that, and so their whey is acidic. And so what do you do with that? And also with a lot of trees, because that's the other thing, that Norway has a lot of trees, so you can just boil things to death. And that's what happens with Brunos. What has been so interesting, and I didn't know, but when we started researching the book, I wanted to include Brunos because it was from Norway. But then what was so interesting is that it has become a global sensation. So Norwegian Brunos can be found in China and the Philippines as a topping for pizza, which is quite unique. Think about a complete different way of thinking about food. But then there is also producers of um, Brunos in Japan and India. And because we're running out of time, I'm just going to tell you that the one from India, uh, made by a good friend of mine, Mausan, won the highest award that an Indian cheese have gotten 2 years ago, for a cheese that Patrick at Night tasted this year as well. That is quite good. A Bruno's made in India, and you're talking about how sort of culture of cheese moves around differently. Not all of the knowledge comes from France and Spain and travels to, the United States or Latin America. There's different ways of this knowledge is arriving, and different textures and palettes from different parts of the world. And so it definitely there is an interest in these other different flavor profiles in India and Japan and Asia, that are not looking maybe for those big cheeses like Parmigiano and Gruyere, but they're looking for these other type of cheeses that have that sort of sweet and sour, which resembles more their cuisines. So I see Tracy ready to come to
What
finish it off.
position did it get? What did it get? A super gold? Was it the Indian Brunost?
Yeah.
I can't
there
remember.
was there was an Indian one and a Japanese one that both got super golds and went to the final. and it
In
was
Norway.
in Norway, and the audience
I
were, we
remember.
didn't know where the cheeses were from. The audience were all like, "Yay, yay," because they thought it was Norwegian.
Yeah.
And then when they found out it was actually made in India and the other one was made in Japan, it was a real shock to, everyone in the room. Um,
That's it. Elethera cheese, isn't
so
it? Yeah.
it's what you do, not the way it's normally eaten in Norway is for breakfast. So you plane it, you get a very, a cheese plane, very thin slice, and you'd have it on some bread or some rye bread or something, and maybe have some jam on the top, or, so it's a kind of sweet bread topping for breakfast. It's breakfast cheese. I can't work out whether I like it. It's one of those cheeses where I just keep going back to it though, and I keep going, I've got to have a bit more, which is a good sign, I think. You have to be careful when you're judging, and you know this, Tracy, you've judged, is you just got to leave your cultural baggage at home a little bit, and not judge cheeses on what you know necessarily. So the more you taste and the more you judge, the more you learn about these different styles of what they should taste like. Um, the better the better you are as a judge. So I mean, that's part of our job, isn't it, Carlos? We spend a lot of time just traveling, tasting cheeses, talking to people, saying, "Is this a good version of this cheese? Why? Okay, file that away for when we come round to judging next."
Terrible jobs you've got. Terrible jobs.
I mean, yeah, it's a tough life, but we are, we do it for you guys,
Yeah.
and the wine
And
matching.
Carlos does some amazing Carlos doesn't teach for the academy, but you do some amazing cheese tours, don't you, with people and taking them on journeys, huge, and especially at the World Cheese Awards as well, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good way, and I would say that the best way to become a good judge is to eat a lot of bad cheese. If you eat a lot of good cheese, you can learn a lot, but if you eat a lot of bad cheese, you learn really fast what's the problem. And so, sometimes, go on supermarket and the one that looks the shabbiest or the one that is scary, go and eat that one because that will tell you like a lot more about cheese. So, that's my two
Yeah,
cents about how to
Phenomenal.
become a
It's
judge.
just been so amazing, and the comments are reflecting that.
yeah, some
I'll
great
send
comments.
you guys the comments on a spreadsheet.
Did we answer
Um,
all the questions, Tracy? I think we got most of them as we were going
I
along.
think we did. I think I
Great.
answered some in the Q&A.
Yeah, thanks for doing that.
But I would just like to say your expertise shines through. I mean, this has been a very, very quick insight into your 100 cheeses that you explore in the book.
Yeah, but
You
Tracy, what I would say is that everybody should buy the book for Christmas. I think that's what I would say. It's available in all good bookshops. It makes a great present. And yeah, it's available all over. I mean, it's published in the US and Australia and
And if you're not quite sure, our lovely Rachel Holding, who's our marketing executive here at the Academy, has written a review of the book and it's on our website. So it is a wonderful cheese book. It's another cheese book. I have many. Carlos, I can compete with yours on your shelf back there.
Thank you.
Um,
I mean,
but
there
I
are there are
just
other cheese books as well, just saying. Um,
less of the plugs, you two.
oh, but just
Um,
yeah. So, no, thank you very much, Tracy. It's been lovely to do this
Thank you,
online. Really
Tracy.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
No, thank you, boys. Amazing, absolute phenomenal cheese experts, and it's just lovely to have you with us. So thank you. Go and
Thank
enjoy your dinner, Patrick. Your taxi is coming
I'm
in
gonna make sure that
11 minutes. Change
I'm
that
gonna make
shirt.
sure I'm gonna make sure there's no cheese on my eyebrows before I turn
Just
up.
bring some cheese to dinner.
Yeah, well, I've sort of had dinner already, and now I'm gonna go for dinner. Oh well, it's a
Oh
tough.
well,
What?
that's fine. See you
Um,
in the webs.
All right,
all right,
John. Even
Bye.
Nick's saying change your shirt.
all
Take
right.
care, everyone. Thank
See you
you all
later.
for joining.